Would you guys still watch this video if I told you I wasn't wearing any pants? Welcome back to yet another episode of What I've Watched, which is a series where I talk about 4 or 5 films that I've watched in the past couple weeks or so, and sort of shed light on them, tell you how I felt about them. It's sort of my way, since I watch so many damn movies, usually one a night at least. It's sort of my way of talking about more films, because I can't review every single one of them in the long-form format, so this is my way of truncating the reviews down to bite size and talking about more films with you guys. I'd love to know which of the films that I show off today that you've seen, so feel free to leave those in the comments below. Let me know what your favorite is, and let's just get a discussion going as usual. I always love talking to you guys. So with that said, let's jump into what I've watched. The first film I'm going to talk about is Saw 2. Now, I am a fan of the original Saw movie. I think it's a good movie. I don't think it's a great movie. I think it's influential. I think it's important what it did for the horror genre in terms of its violence and its unflinching violence, its unflinching approach to horror, to terror, more realistic. And James Wan is, in my opinion, he's a horror maestro. You know, he's one of the few horror masters that we have working today. And I think Saw is kind of a classic, to be honest. I don't love it, but I think it's a classic. And the only other film that I had seen from this franchise, believe it or not, was Saw 2. And still, up to this point, I've only seen the first 2. Now, I did have fond memories of Saw 2 going into it. I loved the house that the strangers all wake up in, and it's sort of like a fun house where they have to figure out what's going on. There are traps everywhere. I thought that was a really cool angle to take the series in, so I really did enjoy it then. How did I feel about it now, here in 2019, probably 10 years at least later? I thought it was a good film. I don't think it's better than the first. I think it's close. I think some of the acting, what is it about the movie that I don't love? Some of the acting gets to me. Some of the characters I think are strange choices, especially some of the characters in the house. I think Donnie Wahlberg does a fine job. I just think the script, the dialogue, just isn't as good as it could have been. Not even as good as the first movie, to be quite honest. I know that's not why people watch these movies. They watch it for the traps and the terror and the torture and all that good stuff. But I don't know. I just felt like the characters really were lacking something in this movie. Just the characters in the original are at least more memorable. Cary Elwes and Danny Glover's character. Even, wasn't Lee Whannell the guy who wrote this movie in the first movie? I think he was. But either way, the first movie had better characters, better acting overall. I still do really like the fun house sort of a setup where the strangers wake up, they have a connection that they have to figure out over time. But watching it a second time, I felt like not enough was done in that house. Not enough problem solving and trap setups, like things that just surprised me. There really wasn't too much of it. Granted, I have already seen the movie, but just not many surprises when it comes to this. I thought the twist, which I did remember, the twist is very good. I thought the twist was pretty interesting. Yeah, so I decided to completely ruin the ending of Saw 2 here, so skabadabadabee, live. I thought that was pretty cool twist. I think Saw 1 and Saw 2 are solid 3 out of 5s for me. I think 1 is better, 2 is close, but not quite there. Should I watch the rest of this series? Is it worth it? I feel like as a horror fan, I need to watch the rest of this series and get up to Jigsaw, because there are just so many movies now. Some of them have to be good, right? Let me know in the comments below if it's worth trudging my way through this series. I just don't know. So that is Saw 2, a film that I do like, I enjoy it, but it's just not great. So, Saw 2. Ooh, I thought it had. The next film I want to talk about was on demand, so I don't have it physically. I really, really want it physically. I believe Kino has a release of this one. It's from 1972, and that is Across from 110th Street. You guys know the song, Across 110th Street. That's where this song was made. The song was made for this movie. It is a mainstream, the best way I could describe it, it's a mainstream blaxploitation crime film. It definitely feels like a blaxploitation film, but it's not campy, it's not cheesy, it doesn't have weird sound effects and over-the-top characters. It's very grounded in realism and gritty realism of the early 70s in New York, in, where is it? Harlem. The film just, I loved this movie, and I love 70s crime, especially the early to mid-70s. The Friends of Eddie Coyle, Godfather films, of course, Mean Streets. I love the grittiness of those early 70s New York movies. They just capture New York at such an interesting time. And this film does it remarkably well. The film has Anthony Quinn and Yaphet Kotto, who play two cops that are very, very different. One's more conservative, one is more liberal. One's old and about to retire, one's young and is just breaking into the job. And they have really great dichotomy between the two characters. Like I said, Anthony Quinn's this old curmudgeon, but he knows how to do his job. He's a good man at heart. And, Yaphet Kotto plays his contemporary, or not contemporary, his opposite, basically. He's a young, fresh out of college, fresh out of training, all that sort of thing, who has a different perspective on the streets and a different modus operandi. So they butt heads, as you can imagine, but they eventually find common ground, sort of. And that's the thing about this film. This film is dreary, man. This film is dark and depressing, and there are no happy endings here. It has something to say. It has a very political message, and I really, really dug it. It basically follows, to sum up the plot, it follows these two black dudes in Harlem, two dudes that are just at wit's end. They're at the end of their rope. They can't take it anymore. And they decide to rip off the mob. The Harlem mob, the black Harlem mob, and the Italian Harlem mob are working together. And these two guys decide to rip them off. It's a very simple plot. It actually reminded me a lot of Killing Them Softly. Obviously, Killing Them Softly draws from films like this, the early 70s. But it was basically the same sort of setup, where the film is just about Anthony Quinn and Yaphet Kotto trying to figure out what happened to this money. The mob, the Italians are after these dudes. The black mob is after these dudes. Everybody's after these two guys. And these two characters that steal the money in the beginning, one of them is named Jim, and his character, he's like the main guy. What an emotive performance. What a natural, visceral performance this guy gives that is just so heartfelt, and it just broke my heart watching this dude. Such a heartbreaking performance that really just, the way it wraps up, it's so depressing, but there is a tiny glimmer of hope. I don't know, it's just a very hopeless film. It's a very dingy, gritty, and grimy early 70s thriller, crime thriller, and I really recommend it, especially if you're into this sort of thing. Check out Across from 110th Street. Next up is a film that I've seen countless times, a film by Alex Proyas, an underrated comic book movie from '94, The Crow. This stars the late, of course, everybody knows the story of Brandon Lee, such a talent that we lost way too soon, just like his father. In fact, everybody knows that he lost his life on the set of The Crow. A prop gun went faulty, ending up killing Brandon Lee on set, and just such a heartbreaking movie to watch for that reason. And I hate to say this, but it adds to the mystique and the wonder of this movie, because his character dies in the beginning of the film. Ironically, that was the scene that they shot where he actually died. His character dies in the beginning of the film, Eric Draven, and is resurrected by a crow that visits his grave. And it's a very poignant story, especially when you know the backstory of Brandon Lee. And it's such a moody, atmospheric, like I said, poignant, entertaining comic book movie from the 90s that more people should talk about. They're talking about remaking this, but it doesn't need it. Ernie Hudson is in this as the cop and sort of the one who Brandon Lee's character, Eric Draven, sort of confides in at a point. Fantastic music, a fantastic score, the cinematography, the set design, the production design is so creative, iconic, and imaginative. Just the only person I could really compare it to is Tim Burton. It has that Gotham City sort of dark look, and of course Dark City, which was a very, I would say it's a companion piece to this, really, in a lot of ways, that came out in '98, that another film that I adore. But this film, yeah, what can you say about The Crow? I love The Crow. It was a blast rewatching this. I don't really have many negative things to say about it. I just think it's a really important movie. And it's so sad to see Brandon Lee in his last performance. I've seen other films with him, Showdown in Little Tokyo, Rapid Fire, some awesome action films where he showed so much charisma and so much presence, and it's such a shame that we lost him. R.I.P. Brandon Lee. That is The Crow. Next up is a film from 2012, the second in the CG trilogy of Resident Evil films that definitely borrow more from the video games than the live-action movies do, which I also adore. I really like these CG movies. Call me crazy. I do enjoy these. Now, I wish I could tell you what the plot of this movie was. Something about a Slavic nation having a civil war, and they're using biomechanical weapons. I don't know what the fucking plot was. All I know is the action in this movie was badass. Leon Kennedy is in this one, and he's kicking ass and taking zombie and weird mutated creatures' names all over the place. You got these, this is where like Resident Evil 5 sort of comes into play, so it's not just straight up Romero-esque zombies like it was in Degeneration. This one has mutated zombies that have like floral patterns coming out of their face and tendrils and very Lovecraftian. So I loved it. I loved all the CG work. I think the CG is actually really, really great, to be honest, especially for 2012. Voice acting is on point. It's a fun movie that I don't know really what happened in it because the plot is just so convoluted and it's pointless and whatever. Watch this movie for the zombie action, for Leon Kennedy kicking ass. That's what this movie delivers, and I really enjoy it. I can't wait to check out Vendetta, which will round out the trilogy. I do own all these on Blu-ray. That is Resident Evil Damnation, directed by Makoto Kamiya. Alright, last but not least, we're going to talk about a Charles Bronson film. Charles Bronson is an actor who I haven't seen many films by, especially being such a big Canon Films person. He did a ton of them in the 80s, and I just haven't gotten into too many of them. I haven't seen the Death Wish movies, save for the first one. I've seen him in bit roles like Once Upon a Time in the West. I just haven't gotten down with Charles Bronson. But every time I watch a movie of his, I love it. And this is no exception. I watched 10 to Midnight. This is a Canon Pictures horror, thriller, slasher, action kind of film. All of that sort of in one. It's more like a thriller slasher, it really is. It's Canon doing a slasher, really. It follows Charles Bronson, who is a detective, who is on the trail of a killer that is killing young women in the area. And he's on the trail of him. His daughter gets embroiled in the situation as well, because she has a connection with the killer in a way. And that is basically the plot. It follows Charles Bronson basically trying to protect his daughter in the second half of the film from being slayed by this maniac. Now, I will say 10 to Midnight is the only slasher I have ever seen, and probably ever will see, where the killer strikes his victims down completely in the nude. I mean, in his birthday suit, top to bottom, naked as fuck. And he kills young women and men naked. So, sure, yes, it does. There is a reason for that. It definitely has to do with his character. His character is sociopathic, very sexually repressed. So all of that has to do with it. So there is a reason why he's naked, but I don't know if it's a good enough reason. But it's awesome seeing this guy running around in the nude, slicing young girls' throats. I've never seen anything like it, and I likely never will. That is basically the film in a nutshell. Charles Bronson does such a great job. He's got so much presence, and the last line in the film is just Chuck Bronson delivering a hell of a one-liner. I loved it. I won't tell you guys what the ending is, but it's just phenomenal. All of the cast is really good. The young girl, who I forgot her name, I'll put it up on the screen. She's in some other movies I love. She has such a good look. She's really cute. She's a really good actress, and she does a great job with the role. And I like her sort of banter between her and her father, Charles Bronson. I even liked the young man that the young girl, I'm forgetting all the names, gets involved with. Basically, Charles Bronson's young partner is a young detective, and him and his daughter sort of kick it off. They have a really cute relationship, actually, because at first it's sort of like tough love, but then they sort of start to like each other, and it's very organic and natural, and something you don't see in a lot of movies, especially from the 80s, in terms of that sort of relationship. So that was cool. So that is 10 to Midnight. Check it out. It's a canon thriller slasher crime film with Charles Bronson and a naked killer. So you can't really go wrong. I just want to thank you guys for checking out another episode of What I've Watched, and I hope you guys enjoyed it. I hope you guys have seen some of these films so that we could get a discussion going on in the comments below. If you enjoyed this video, feel free to give it a thumbs up, and if you're new to the channel, go ahead and hit the subscribe button, as well as the little bell for notifications. Anyway, guys, I will see you next time. Bored Cyborg, out. Oh, I can't feel my feet. Okay, I've been sitting too long. I'm gonna go now.